G'day, welcome back. A bit of change of pace today. I'm returning to a topic I covered in an earlier video where I did a bit of statistical analysis of the blunder rates of the different world champions. Please have a look at that if you haven't. And the usual suspects, Capablanca, Carlson, Fischer, and so on, show up very, very highly on that sort of scoring system. Now, I thought I might do a few more projects along those lines, so I'm just going to start up a little playlist, chess stats, and we'll look at different sort of aspects of chess using all this sort of software and the tools we've been sort of working to build, which will make it all a bit easier. Part of the reason I'm doing this video now is on Chess Dojo. There was a recent video with Kenneth Regan, kind of the doyen of all things to do with centipawn loss, and he's done a lot of cheating analysis and so on. And I thought we could just do a little adventure, a little sort of scratch the surface and see what we can come up with in terms of having a look at the quality of the world chess champions. I mean, I'm doing that because I've already been looking at the blunder rates, and I've got the database put together, and thought I'd just extend the analysis. The funny thing about this video is basically it's a PowerPoint presentation. Sorry about that, shouldn't be YouTube. Anyway, I've done plenty of PowerPoint presentations, so just sort of takes me back to sort of nightmare scenarios. So we'll just, without further ado, let's get on with what we're going to go through today. Basically, this is the process. Now, I'm following in the footsteps of other people who've done this many years ago and continue to look at it. The final slide, I just sort of highlight a few people you might have a look for their work. So I've got the database of World Chess Championship matches, and then the first thing is to do a bit of cleaning of that. I mean, I don't want to do rapid games and so on, so I stripped them out, and I've done classical world championships, so I haven't included the FIDE ones, etc., just stuff like that. So that's the data we're working with. It's only a bit more than 1,000 games. Compared with my last analysis, I have added on Gukesh Ding recent match, and then the next step is sending those games through the analysis engine. I use Stockfish. I use Python Jest as sort of the method of basically going through the PGN file and storing the results. And then having done all that, then we've got good information on centipawn losses. I think it works out about 50,000 moves are analyzed. And then the real bugbear here is how you adjust for complexity. So I've got quite a bit on that, which is probably where my analysis, just scratching the surfaces, is failing a bit. But anyway, just something quite interesting to have a look at. So let's move on. I'm going to go to my PowerPoint presentation. It's very funny. Okay, so this is just quickly showing the steps along the way, which is just outlined. There in Skid versus PC is all the games. You can see from the first one in 1886. And over here, you can see this is the way I store the analysis in the PGN, right? I'll just briefly go over that. I mean, I could have stored it in a flat CSV file or something like that, but I just put it in the comments so that later on I could step through the games still using Python Chess. Right, so if you do that, send it through and then just basically chart it. What's the average centipawn loss by player? Now, I think we have the usual suspects standing out here. We've got oh, that didn't work, sorry about that. We've got Lasker, got Capablanca, got Fischer there. Well, Fischer's kind of in with Karpov and Kasparov in this version, and we've got Carlson, right? I mean, these players are probably widely regarded as being very, very accurate players. And on the other hand, you've got some of the other players such as Irv. And Tal is known as being a wild player, so his centipawn loss is actually quite high, but we'll see as we go through the analysis what we can do with his positioning, with analyzing the complexity of the position he plays. Right, so let's keep on going on. So this was the big dilemma. Average centipawn loss, fairly easy to calculate, just throw it in the engine. What's the move the player played versus what's the best engine move at different depths. But I think we had to adjust, once again, I'm following Guid versus Bratko for the complexity of the position. Now, here is the algorithm I use, which basically says we'll go through from depth 2 to 12, and if the best computer move changes at that ply, then we'll add on the change in the evaluation, right? Now, That's what I tried to do. I think because of the quiescent search in Stockfish, this did not work well. A lot of positions had complexity of 0, about 40% of them, so that didn't really work very well. So you can just see the sorts of things which I then tried to look at. There's attack pieces. That's something which Python chess gives you. King safety, you know, how many squares around the king are attacked, number of legal moves, and number of nodes evaluated in the position, things like that. They didn't really work very well. So what I settled on is another one, which I'm not going to say is great, but as I'd stored those 10 moves, I just added up all the changes in evaluation through the first 10 ply, so that you get a sense of how much it's fluctuating up, fluctuating down, even if it's the same move. Anyway, so that's the measure of complexity I settled on. And then what you see is that I call this the sum of evaluation changes. And just match that against CPL. It's actually, it's not too bad. It still says Carlsen. Carlsen has less complex position, but obviously very, very accurate. Fischer has quite complex positions and also quite accurate. And you can see Tal has, more complex positions. So it kind of fits our model. And then we've got Kappa over here. Very accurate, but also in not so complicated positions. Right, so now the next step I'm following is how do you actually build the sort of adjustment for the complexity. And the way of doing that is by bucketing all the complexity in about 10 buckets of equal number of moves. So it's about 5,000 moves in each of these buckets, which basically just represent a band of complexity. And then if you look at all players, I'm very happy with this sort of layout, that it actually shows that the more complex position, the more likelihood of a centipawn loss. And this is kind of almost like an actuarial definition of risk. The sort of the least complex moves have a very low chance of centipawn loss, about 5, which is very low. And then you get more complex positions and you're actually getting up to almost like a quarter of a pawn expected move error. So that's the idea. And then what you will need to do is basically work out the player's profile by complexity bin and effectively take their error rates and shift it to what the average player would have done. Now, here's all the players. I've sort of done the allocation to the different bins, and you can see that pick a color, maybe brown. That sort of gives you an idea of the positioning of the brown. Sorry about that. Shows you Steinus is brown over that side, so he played quite complex positions. Capablanca, less complex. Fischer, quite complex. Carlsen, yeah, sort of middling. And where's Tal? He's always a good one. Tal, quite complex positions. So you can see that, obviously this sort of represents the percentage distribution of moves. And obviously Tal's in more complicated moves, then if you feed in the sort of the centipawn losses, then he would have expected to have been making more errors given the profile of his complexity. Now, so moving on to that, we can actually get to what we think is the adjusted match accuracy. And what I've done here is that you can see I put this measurement here. I called it beats for lack of anything else. It's how much a player beat his expected CPL by given the complexity of the positions he was playing. Now, it's actually not too dissimilar. Lasker looks good, Kappa still looks good, Fischer looks better than before, Carlsen looks very good. Tal's been moved back into this batch here. So yeah, it makes some sort of sense. Now, the original study didn't have Fischer having such an amazing adjustment, so I'm not 100% sure. However, if we quickly look at the Chessmetrics rankings, it does actually show that in 72, just the year of 72, that's the highest rated year ever. So it makes sense that during the World Championship match in that year, that Fischer would show up very well on any sort of measure of CPL. And we can see that when you're comparing Fischer with one dot, obviously other players like Kasparov and Lasker and Kaplan and so on, I'll go back to this slide, their dots are obviously sort of a 5-year average, so they've had to maintain the play level for a longer time. But anyway, that's a good little sort of summary of where you might think the players are in terms of accuracy. And what I will do, let's have quickly, we can do two quick things before I close up. This is just scratching the surface, right? Here's every match, right? So, got, let me just highlight again. We've got Fisher down here in 72. And now the interesting thing I'm going to say about this is that it kind of does reinforce some things which we kind of think. I don't know if that's good or bad. First thing I've noticed, there's a few players, Lasker, Alakine, also Fisher, also Petrosian, possibly Jay Spassky. Not so clear recently, is that the players, the first time the player actually achieved, they tended to play better. And then maybe the second time, they tended not to play better. So it was a bit weaker. Alakine really matched Kappa in 21, and then you can see he went back to, going to say, a not such good level after that. And Petrosian as well outperformed and then moved back a bit. So certainly seems to be a tendency that the first World Championship match, or when people are trying to win and haven't won it before, they tend to play a little bit better. Carlsen's kind of the opposite. He's really very strong around this period, and I mean, took advantage of Anand. Anand was very strong probably 5 years earlier, but by the time Anand was meeting Carlsen, he'd come off a little bit in terms of the observed standard of his play. So I mean that all makes sense. You know, the young gun sort of surpasses the old master. And then just one last slide on this analysis. The other thing is let's just throw all the players who played in the World Championship match in, and you can see a few things which are fairly clear, right? Some of them standard is not too good compared to the world champion at the time. Bogolyubov didn't do much, and there's these couple of periods here where it was actually decided by a tournament, and the players who didn't win, some of them were a deal weaker, and I also sort of show you this pocket here, which shows you that that Carlsen, Caruana, Karyakin time period was very, very high standard of play. Close out with further study if you want to look at a few more things. I was following Guid Bratko. It's quite an old paper, I think from about 2005 or so, 2006. But the analysis there I've tried to mirror. There's some good papers by Ferreira, and then I mentioned Kenneth Regan already. He's got his 30,000 lines of C++. I don't, so he obviously has very advanced analysis on these things. And then I'd also say with chess.com, their CAPS ranking of players and player accuracy, very interesting. There's a lot of debate about that, so worth just Googling and having a look at some of the articles on chess.com. A lot of people sort of having an opinion on whether it's a good or bad way of looking at it, but it really got the debate going, which is great, because it's just an interesting way of trying to look at the different chess players through history. Sorry, my throat's a bit off today. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching.